So you think we're better off as black people now than we were before LBJ passed those policies?
Yo, that's such an embarrassing thing to say. Yeah, no shit. Like, yes, dude. What the fuck?
I'm saying it.
Black conservatives are everywhere.
That's why I'm here to show my support as a black man for Trump.
Donald Trump is cozying up to them.
Come here, let me give you a hug.
And the RNC was full of them.
President Trump, we have the greatest economy in our lifetime.
America is not a racist country.
You've probably heard a lot of people talking about black Republicans, but I spent all of the RNC talking to black Republicans.
So it is with being a black conservative. I equate it to being gay back in the 50s or 60s.
I think there's something really funny about saying that being a black conservative means you have to stay in the closet and like hide that you're a black conservative. I've literally never met a black conservative that doesn't and telegraph that they are a black conservative. That statement right there is the funniest fucking thing you could say. First of all, off the top dome, worst fade you've ever seen. Not even a fade at all. The fits are out of control. Even from judging a book by its cover standpoint, you just immediately know. And if you don't know, much like a vegan, a black conservative will tell you that they are a black conservative. Even if you miss the mark on the aesthetic front, you will hear it. What a ridiculous statement to make. It's like thinking that there's not a 3-minute ad break at the top of the hour. There is one, okay?
One reason why I'm pro-Trump and I'm a conservative is because I truly believe in the individualistic approach to the problems that we see within the black community or in America.
Yeah, I mean, here, this guy. This is my favorite guy. I love this guy. He's always at the airports. Where is he flying? He's like Tom Hanks in that movie of the guy who got stuck in the airport. But at least he's on the plane all the time. He also has like a very annoying vibe. Like he's so fucking annoying.
Like that? I'm voting for him. Make the tell him.
He's so fucking smug.
Black Republicans specifically are some of the most disliked and unpopular political figures within the black community for a reason. I'm pissed. Of the 4 black Republicans in the U.S. House of Representatives, zero represent majority black districts.
I am royally pissed.
Something they seem to be very proud of.
South Carolina is majority white, correct?
Yeah, it's Georgia.
My district is majority white district. Your Utah is majority white district, correct? Michigan, Florida, is your district majority white district?
A lot of white people had to vote for it.
There is an obvious disconnect, and that's what I want to explore today. I wanted to know what draws a black person to identify with this Republican Party.
Trump is being for black people.
How'd that happen?
It's our job, me especially as a black conservative, to get out there, get on the ground, and teach these people all about the black conservative movement.
I learned a lot about black Republicans in these conversations. Their motivations, their stories, their goals. These are real people with genuinely held beliefs. Beliefs that I largely disagree with, and I told them as much. I tried to have respectful dialogue with them. So in this video, I want to share these people with you. I learned a lot about black Republicans, and I think you will too. So with that, let's dig in. In talking to black Republicans, I found that their most consistent ideological North Star was an emphasis on personal responsibility. For those I spoke to, there was a real value for rigid individualism as opposed to collective progress and identity. Take Topher, for example.
And that's one reason why I'm pro-Trump and I'm a conservative is because I truly believe in the individualistic approach to the problems that we see within the black community or in America. And you can think about it, Black Wall Street, Harlem Renaissance, all that time, we was doing great. But when the policies came in and started destroying the black community slowly and slowly.
I think you'll notice a theme of dissonance present in these interviews. On the one hand, for example, Topher endorses an individualistic approach to solving the problems we face as a community. But on the other hand, he points to Black Wall Street or the Harlem Renaissance, communities that I would consider on the Mount Rushmore of black collective power. And he points to them as times we should look back on with admiration. And the question is, which one is it? Is it rigid individualism where we get it out of the mud on our own? Or is it about creating communities where we work together to build our collective resource?
Okay, don't dig that far, you know what I mean? The moment that you interrogate the opinion of like any American voter, it doesn't have to be like a black Republican, just like any American voter whatsoever. You dig one layer deep and it's just gonna immediately implode. There's no rhyme or reason.
I think it's worth pointing out that this more poverty now than back then line is verifiably false. It falls in line with a theme that people like Byron Donalds have advanced continuously throughout this election cycle.
During Jim Crow, the black family was together.
Yeah, that's right.
During Jim Crow, more black people were not just conservative, because black people always have been conservative-minded.
It's worth noting that the black poverty rate has been falling ever since black people started receiving civil rights protections. It's almost as if these progressive policies worked.
Now, you mentioned Black Wall Street, brother, and I want to be very real with you. Black Wall Street was Tulsa, Oklahoma, the Greenwood District, where black people built their own community, beautiful economy, making it for themselves, and white people destroyed it. It wasn't policy.
Yeah, no, it was policies. The policy of taking prop airplanes with like Looney Tunes style TNT dynamite and dropping that Looney Tunes style TNT dynamite from airplanes directly on top of Black Wall Street. That was policy and not white terror.
It was those white people.
White people.
Oh, he said bad apples. White supremacy is not real. It's just bad apples.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
And let me just say this. Elaine, Arkansas. Rosewood in Florida, Atlanta, Georgia, the Sweet Auburn District, North Nashville and Nashville, Tennessee. Each one of these communities were booming black economies where white people, not in the same place, it was the same group of people every time, destroyed those communities. So you can't say it's policy.
I didn't frame it as a policy thing. But when the policies came in and started destroying the black community slowly and slowly. And the reason why I'm saying that is because now we're trying to categorize all white people as evil.
No.
And what I'm trying to say is, 4 years after that, Black Wall Street, we built everything they had, and they prospered for the next 40 years until policy came in and destroyed it because they decided to build a freeway over their town, and that destroyed. So what I'm saying is, if we look at policy,
my God. He's not wrong. It is policy. He's talking about a deliberate white supremacist, racist fucking policy that regularly, like, why did the highway have to go through that location? Who made this deliberate decision?
Lucky for you, I actually made a video about Tulsa, Oklahoma's Greenwood District. It was definitely white racism that destroyed Black Wall Street and other black communities through explicitly racist acts of state-sanctioned violence. This is why an accurate, full telling...
Not a big deal, but you got the two events confused. The airplane bombing was the Africa family. Airplane bombings were used in Tulsa. It was a helicopter for the Africa family in the MOVE bombing in 1985. The Philadelphia Police Department took out a helicopter and dropped C4 on top of a family that was bunkered. And if I remember, the mayor said, let it burn. They did not put the fire out. They wiped out a city block.
Black people have been, throughout American history, targeted as a group, from slavery to black codes to Jim Crow to mass incarceration to anti-inclusion efforts today. But we've also made progress by harnessing the power of collective action during Reconstruction and the Civil Rights Movement, and even today during the black-owned business boom.
From LBJ, that's why he said we have these Negroes voting Democrat for the next 200 years. But all those policies have not done what they promised.
I would not agree.
So you think we're better off as black people now than we were before LBJ passed those policies?
Yo, that's such an embarrassing thing to say. Yeah, no shit. Like, yes, dude. What the fuck?
So are you talking about the Civil Rights Act of 1964? Is that what you're describing as a negative thing? That's LBJ. I just want to be clear. That's LBJ, who you said, were we better off before LBJ? LBJ signed the Civil Rights Act of 1964.
I'm talking about the war on poverty.
I just want to answer that one. I want to answer that specific one first. Was the Civil Rights Act of 1964 bad
I
thing?
agree with the Civil Rights Act of 1964.
Thank you.
But at the same time, I prefer dangerous freedom over peaceful slavery.
I don't know what that means. Explain.
What it means is I would rather, given the fact that even back then we still had our families together, communities were stronger back then.
That's not even true though. Like, what the people were getting lynched. You couldn't eat at the same restaurant. Like, what the fuck? The craziest part about it is that, like, obviously the criminal justice system has basically repackaged slavery, kept it legal, but this time under the criminal justice system. So it still turns out like similar results in general. Obviously there is a multifaceted approach. There's a million different reasons why black communities are underserved on top of that. I don't know how I'm like, this is such an insane conversation to have. Like the notion that like black communities in the United States of America were better off before the civil rights era is nutty. Thomas Sowell has destroyed entire generations.
Freedom of not knowing and controlling people with policies as much as possible versus the peaceful slavery of being married and tied to the government.
You're saying he didn't read that? He 100% is doing Thomas Sowell. Every single part of this argument comes from Thomas Sowell. 100%. The welfare state was bad. It separated black families. It incentivized black mothers to stay away from black fathers. All this shit is Thomas Sowell.
I talked to Pastor Lorenzo Sewell.
Yeah, so anyone that wants to come to church, they're able to come. So when President Trump called, I thought about it like you calling me and saying, hey, Pastor, I want to invite a friend to church who has 34 felonies. Hey, Pastor, I want to invite a friend to church who is a womanizer.
I was on that Thomas Sowell when I was younger, lol. Oh my God. That's even crazier when you're younger. Like, it just makes no sense to me. You're going to be a nerd in the weirdest way possible, where you're just like reading a black dude defend white supremacy. How the fuck does that even happen? Is the question I would like to ask Clarence fucking Thomas. So I can't even shit on you, chatter, because guess who also got radicalized by Thomas fucking Sowell? Supreme Court of the United States Justice, Clarence fucking horse porn Thomas. That's real. That's a real thing.
He's the lead pastor at a black church in Detroit that Trump visited earlier this year.
Like they did, black church, the air quotes. Look at the church.
He was also a featured speaker at the RNC.
So all my friends back in Detroit who are Democrats, you can't deny the power of God on this man's life.
Being raised in a hyper-Christian school does something to your brain. Yeah, but like, there's a lot of very religious black folk. They don't fucking operate like this at all. If you've ever been to a black church, actually, not this one, black churches, at least the ones I've seen and the ones I've been to, are very political. They are a organizing ground, especially in the South, for the Democratic Party specifically. The Democratic Party takes advantage of that quite a bit. And also their politics are pretty fucking awesome, usually. I guess all churches are pretty political when you think about it, especially in the United States of America.
Could it be that Jesus Christ preserved him for such a time as this? Could it be?
Why should black people support the Republican ticket and Donald Trump specifically?
What I would say to any black person is this, specifically about the Republican platform. I would say, look, do your research, right? I would say look back to 170 years ago in this state, where a group of patriots stood up and they started that grand old party to stop the expansion of slavery. If a black person said, well, Pastor, Donald Trump is racist, the Republican Party is racist, well, let's play that theme out throughout history.
Yeah, also, the Republican Party in its inception was like the closest that American major parties have gotten to Marxism. Obviously, it's not the same Republican Party. If the Republican Party is the anti-slavery party still, then why is it that the Republicans are the ones rocking the Confederate garb, man? Why is it that the Republicans are the ones who are defending Confederate generals and monuments? Why is it that it's the Republicans that are going out to vote and they're wearing the fucking stars and bars proudly while they're doing that? How the fuck does that still work? Look no further than Abe Lincoln. That's it. Like, don't worry about it afterward. It's so crazy because like there are a lot of black Republican legislators early on that wrote incredible legislation. But anyway, it doesn't matter anymore because obviously it's very different. Southern Democrats led the charge to secede from the Union and establish a Confederate States, though. Yeah, the point is, do you think that post-civil rights, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party abide by the same exact values? Like, especially saying it nowadays when in the past, the parties were not as polarized. Like, they weren't as firmly committed to a almost universal platform. Back then, you had Southern Democrats and Southern Republicans that sometimes would be aligned on similar interests, Northern Democrats and Northern Republicans that aligned on similar interests, because a lot of the party interests, or rather a lot of the political interests, came from regional economic interests. Now in the modern era, it's just like Democrats are one thing across the board, across the entire country, and Republicans are one thing across the board in the entire country.
When we look at Frederick Douglass, black Republican. So that's on the political side, why I believe that a black American should be willing to look at the Republican platform. In terms of my political convictions as a pastor, my conviction in my heart, a black woman's womb is the most dangerous place for a black child to be.
Oh, God. Does he mean like infant mortality rates or something? Like maternal mortality rates for black women being like disproportionately much higher than any other race in the country? I don't think he's talking about that. I think he's talking about abortion, right?
My conversation would be, give our black babies a chance. Look at the Republican Party in terms of President Donald J. Trump. This is what I would say. Don't look at the man, look at the mission. Don't look at his past. Look at what your agenda is for your community in the future.
Conservatives are leading the charge to remove protections for voting rights, protections for maternal mortality, interventions in California, affirmative action, diversity, equity, and inclusion. These are all issues that pertain directly to the people that I know that you serve in your community. why should they support the party behind the hindrance, the advancement of the very things that I know you stand for?
Sure. Black people, they don't want to be put in a position because they're black. Lorenzo, I deserve this position because I'm black.
But I want to. But you know that that's not what DEI is. DEI is about fair hiring practices, opening up opportunity, like creating pathways, like.
But you're smart. You're an intelligent man, and those that would say this, I believe they're very intelligent. It costs more money not to hire the person who's the best than to be racist.
This is the coolest, silliest way to argue at the behest of white supremacy, because the entire reason for why these sorts of policies, including like affirmative action and shit, exist is so that you, by force at certain points, try to get like the majority white population in positions of power to not make racist exclusionary decisions in hiring practices, which has been the standard throughout American history and still continues to this day through a form of implicit biases that people don't even know they have. You're a white man, you're going to most likely want to hire a white man. That's just how it works statistically. You have the capacity to overlook other races regardless of their qualifications. The anti-DEI narrative literally is built around this faulty assumption that a black person is never as good as a white person when they are hired for that job. That means like if a black person is in a position of power, that means that they automatically disqualified a more qualified white person that should have gotten that position. It's ridiculous. What percentage of the average workplace should be white? I don't know, man. What kind of fucking stupid question is that? That's not how this works anyway. Yeah, 0%. When I'm president, no more white people.
Now let's just say, hey, there are 20 white guys that are not as competent as you, but I'm not gonna pick you because you're black. It's gonna cost me more money.
They don't even know that this qualified person exists, right?
Sure, I hear you.
The pathways are the problem.
One of the funniest parts about this is that like black people have disposable income as well. They also participate in the economy. So do brown people, so do women. So these DEI initiatives, as a matter of fact, are conducted in an effort to elevate people from different backgrounds to higher positions, hopefully to not overlook them when they are qualified. The reason for why they do it is because corporate boards that have more diversity end up having more profitable corporations. It's good to have a black dude on the board. They have an entirely different world experience than the 8 other white dudes that are on that board that might be able to see certain things that the 8 other white dudes will miss because of their privilege, their biases. It turns out it helps profitability in corporations in general. That's why there's always like that thing where we'll look at something and we'll be like, was there not like a single black person in the company at any point that like looked at this and went like, well, this is kind of weird. We probably shouldn't do it.
In his book, The Grift, Clay Cane details the history of how black conservatives have thrown black people under the bus to get ahead personally. From black Republicans like Isaiah Montgomery and Booker T. Washington to modern black Republicans like Clarence Thomas. Clay Cane makes the case that the modern black Republican is likely, if not assuredly, a grifter, a person who is doing that which is politically expedient rather than doing what is right, doing whatever they need to do to get that all expenses paid trip to fancy places.
Because Clarence Thomas is a really interesting person because he's like also kind of a black nationalist too. That's how he started off as originally. And he still has some of these like black separatist opinions. Very weird. Also has a white wife. It's like odd in every way. Truly a unique figure.
In my reporting, I've spoken to Clay Cane, who wrote a book about grifters, how sometimes black Republicans will align themselves with political power for their own personal advantage.
Sure.
What do you say to a person who says, hey, like you're a talented, gifted person, but we didn't necessarily know who you were, but now you're speaking on one of the biggest platforms in the world tonight?
Quite frankly, I don't need another opportunity to speak. Has the Republican Party said, Lorenzo, we're going to write you a big check? No. If they did, it's just going to go right to the community anyway, right at the end of the day, because that's where my salary goes.
You've mentioned Frederick Douglass and others from the 1800s, early 1900s. In those times, black Republicans were elected by black people.
Sure.
Today, black Republicans, they're elected in majority white districts.
Agreed.
Why is it difficult, maybe even some would say impossible for a black Republican to be elected in a black?
That's a good question. You know what? I'll wrestle with that. The Republican Party, in my opinion, they have, I believe, drifted from their roots. in terms of black people having authority within that party, I don't believe the Republican Party has learned well how to support financially those who are black Republicans that want to come out the closet. I equate it to being gay back in the 50s or 60s. You didn't come out the closet then because you could be ostracized. So it is with being a black conservative. Me just having President Trump at our church. If I could play the voicemail, sir. These are the ones I haven't had time to delete. If I could send you the emails where it's like, really? I mean, people that I thought loved me, they're like calling me everything but a child of God. I'm like, hold on for a second.
How does that make you feel?
I was a drug dealer. I was a street pharmacist, right? Former. So the people that you love are hurts. I have to be frank with you, you know. But other people that don't know you, don't understand your motives, I get it. When tensions are high, motives are questions. And tensions have been high in our country as it pertains to politics. So people question my motives. I understand that. But for the people that love you, it hurts. It really does. And that's the reason why black people won't come out the closet.
A relatively small percentage of black people will vote for Trump this November. But I have a take and I want to share it with you. A more inclusive and racially diverse Republican Party could be a good thing. American conservatives and Republicans have made the lives of black people difficult on purpose. It could be a good thing to see more black Republicans if it means that the Republican Party is becoming actively hostile to the racists who have called that party their home for the last 60 years at least. But the reality is that racists, or at least racism enablers, were present and accounted for at the RNC. They were given stage time.
It also happens to be the entire platform of the Republican Party still to this day. That's just it. It is the party. It is the platform. You have two racist parties. At least one is like doing its very best to mask its racism in the endless continuation of white supremacy and policing in the criminal justice system that is baked into American existence in general. And I'm of course talking about the Democratic Party in that circumstance. But the other one is actively running on the racism because it looks at the white supremacist criminal justice system and it says, this is good and we need more of it. You are so wrong. Explain the racism better than just saying everything is racist. Whew, oh, buddy. The American criminal justice system disproportionately targets black people. The American financial system has historically also underserved black communities through legal processes and now illegal ways. Segregation in the South, Jim Crow laws in the South, redlining in the North and everywhere else. And this has led to black people having worse outcomes overall on healthcare, education, job opportunities, and more importantly than that, having a criminal record. This is what we mean when we say America is a white supremacist nation. Obviously, I'm not even talking about the long history. I'm just saying last night you blamed white supremacy for the No Palestine speaker. Yeah, that is a different form of white excellence, white supremacy, America's hegemonic superpower status that comes from destroying the global South, which is comprised predominantly of non-white people, brown people, black people. That is also still white supremacy. This is foreign policy, though. We're talking about domestic policy, which is like similar to foreign policy in that regard. You can see black communities as like internal colonies. It's in every part of the system. And it manifests itself in ways that you oftentimes don't even recognize. Like, for example, now that like the Watchmen and shit talked about it extensively, it's a little bit different. But back in the day when I used to talk about like the Tulsa massacre, there were black people in this community that didn't even know about it. Why is it that a Turkish white guy is talking about a important part of black American history to black people that grew up in the United States of America? How is it that that's the first time that they heard about it? It's because in a lot of the curriculum, they don't teach it. It's like an afterthought. It's rarely discussed. Now, I think it's a little bit different now, but I'm talking like 6-7 years ago. That's because American education is still firmly a whitewashed version of events. This is one of the unique ways you don't even recognize where you are, even as a black person, growing up in a white supremacist system.
And I'll tell you what did not feel central. Black people. I actually attended the Black Delegate event during the RNC, and something really interesting happened. The event was taking place away from the main convention center. And in the middle of it, unexpectedly, former President Donald Trump's motorcade could be heard approaching the event from a distance. It really felt like this big moment of acknowledgement, the perfect punctuation in a banner year for Black Republicans. Journalists and news crews were scrambling to get into position to make sure they captured that moment when he comes to this event. But then his motorcade just drove by. It turned out he wasn't coming to the event. It wasn't on his schedule. It just happened to be along his route.
He waved at us. In case you didn't see it, he waved.
The disappointment for this group of Black Republicans was tangible and kind of poetic. The RNC had quite a few drive-by acknowledgments that Black people exist, but little to no substantive action plans.
The formative role that Black Republicans play at the RNC historically is literally to stand there and say whoever the president is not actually racist. Sometimes going beyond that and even denying that systemic racism doesn't exist as well. I watch this shit every fucking time. I watch CPAC, I watch RNC, I watch all this shit. And that's precisely the role every Black Republican plays. Roll them out as human props to talk about how I'm Black. And as a Black man, Donald Trump is not racist. That's all Black Republicans are there to do, which is crazy. And it has not changed in like the decade that I've been covering politics professionally.
They would show up and be present with and for this community. And if I'm honest with you, I think that's on purpose. The only way the Republican Party becomes this ideologically conservative but racially inclusive big tent party is if there is a fundamental rejection of the people and policy and practice they currently hold as sacred, near and dear to their political vision. As long as the GOP makes racial justice a political issue worth fighting against, a majority of Black people will never vote for the party. As long as teaching Black history is woke, as long as race-conscious solutions to race-conscious problems are demonized, as long as they commit to denying racism's impact on society, Black people, by and large, are not going to vote for them. But these guys may, and that might be good enough for them.